So this video is just a bit of fun really, just looking at building a server rack out of Raspberry Pis. So a typical e-commerce site back in the day would have been created with a number of different servers. So you would have had a database server, a couple of load balance web servers, and then a firewall and load balancer. So this is a Raspberry Pi Ubuntu version. So on this we've installed MySQL. So we can just log on and show the databases. So one of the things that we used to do for MySQL, or certainly I used to do, is we used to set up the MySQL server to use InnoDB, which means that you could use transactions, and it was pretty resilient to crashing. Although to be fair, I mean, MySQL always used to be pretty resilient anyway. I remember days of having the MySQL server running for 365 days without even rebooting it. So we can just have a quick look at the MySQL conf. So we've got some stuff in there for various bits and bobs for key buffer sizes. Remember those were quite important for queries and performance on queries and stuff like that. And then we've got a few other bits and pieces, so maximum log size, and just the default storage engine really. So that's just a general quick overview of MySQL. And then we've got a web server. So this is running Apache 2. It's also running Tomcat as well. So what we used to do is we used to set up an Apache web server to act as the front end server to handle all the HTML and site content basically, and then we'd use Apache Tomcat to do the server-side processing and accessing the DB and stuff like that. So a couple of things to note on here is that this is just an out-of-the-box Apache installation, but we've got some conf that we've added in to enable Apache to offload requests to the Tomcat web server. So in here we've just got some options to load the Tomcat module, Jakarta module. One of the things I had to do on this particular installation, so I had to make the modjk SO module. So that's just a matter of downloading the source from the Apache site, running .configure, and then running make. It'll kind of warn of a few things, or it did warn of a few things for the AP access module not being installed, so I had to install that as well. But yeah, it's just basic, a simple config file. And then if we have a look at the sites enabled, then what we've got here is we've got a JK mount directive to forward anything in the examples location over to the AJP13 connector. So just go back up a little bit and go back into conf. And here we've got another file, which is the workers.properties file. So this is where we set up the port that Apache is going to forward the requests onto Tomcat. So that's that really. And then if we just have a quick look at Tomcat, so Tomcat was installed in here, and then we go to the conf folder, and then we had to make some changes to the server. So we've had to set up the AJP 1.3 connector here and tell it to listen on certain ports. So that's kind of the config really. Everything else is pretty much out of the box. If we have a quick look in the web app, so this is where the applications, you know, the e-commerce store or whatever, for the server-side code would sit. So if we go into the examples folder, one thing I've added on this, because it's a cluster, to prove that the cluster was working, we just added a quick JSP file. So we're just going to get the local host, get the host name, and then we're just going to print it out along with a session ID. So that's one of the web servers. The other web server is pretty much the same. In fact, it's exactly the same, and it should be really. And then the final thing that we've got is the firewall, the load balancer. So if we have a quick look here, so we've got 2 wireless LANs on this. So the first 3 Raspberry Pi 4s, and basically we've got quite substantial storage on that, as you would expect for a DB server. We can also have a quick look and see it's running a quad-core processor. But for firewall, you don't really need that level of hardware. So it's got small disk space because it's pretty much not going to be doing anything other than forwarding traffic, so not really serving content or anything like that. And then I think this one has got quad core, but it's a lower processor. So like I say, it's got 2 wireless LANs. So one's a public facing LAN, and then the other one's internal. So the internal ones will allow it to route traffic to the web servers. One of the other things that got installed on here was something called HA proxy. Just have a quick look at that. So basically what that allows us to do is to set up so by default you get a load of config on here, but one thing we've set up here is a front end IP address, and then we're bouncing that off to a back end round robin set of servers. So we've got 2 servers in the cluster, and I'll show you in a second, but it'll ping pong between the 2 servers. And then we've got Tomcat directly if we want to access it. We shouldn't need to access it because we're setting up the mod.jk and AJP connector. Then that will forward any requests for a URL onto Tomcat directly, but it's just for testing purposes. obviously is this is a firewall as well as a load balancer, and we need to set up a few rules. So what we've done here is to set up a rule to accept anything on the internal wireless LAN. Then we've set up another couple of rules to allow us to access HTTP from the public facing LAN, and then port 8080, which is what Tomcat's running on, if we need to. I mean, we wouldn't normally do that on a public facing website. You'd only use HTTP. You're pretty much locked down everything on the public facing IP to only the ports that you need. So then we'd save that, make sure everything still works, and then the final thing we'd do is we'd apply a policy to drop everything on the input side of things by default. So that means that we can still access the server from the internal LAN, but now everything's being dropped apart from the 2 ports that we've specifically opened up. So we can check that works by trying to SSH onto the public IP, and we can't, so we know it's working. So what we can do now is we can check each one of the servers and make sure that they're working. So we can see that's all fine there, and then we can check the public one as well, and then we can check the public Apache site there, and then we can now check the public IP and check that the load balance is working properly. So as you can see, we're ping-ponging between the 2 servers. We're getting different session IDs. So that means that we haven't got any sticky session on here, so if this was a proper site, then you wouldn't be able to store anything within a session. So that's something that could be configured on the load balancer, I guess. So if we just have a quick look at some of the examples, so we've got some servlet examples here. So this is all the compiled up Java code that would be, the kind of e-commerce store, I guess. So we can have a quick look, and got some session stuff in there, and I've got Hello World in there as well. And then we've got some JSP examples. So these are the essentially similar to ASP, but they weren't compiled up until the page was accessed, so it'd be quite slow on the first page load of that being changed. So that's it really. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Cheers.